Well, everyone, last year I made a video about the trams of Hamburg, or I guess rather, the lack thereof. And really, most German cities do have them, from big ones like Cologne to small stops such as Nordhausen to, for the most part, half of Berlin, the east half. I went over the history of the Hamburg tram network, how despite the final tram running in 1978, its doom was spelled back in the 1950s, and multiple plans that have been made to bring trams back to the spine city over the years in that video. And on the whole, it was well received. I got a hashtag up and around, hashtag Tramburg, which I continue to use in videos on trams in Hamburg, both long and short form. I'm certain this won't be the last of them. Indeed, since then, there have even been a couple of new proposals floated in the Hamburg area to actually bring them back, most either to the Lurup district or to the area south of the Elbe River, particularly around Harburg. And I'm really happy to see it, if perhaps a bit cynical on anything actually being built. But really, I knew this wasn't the end when I made that first video last autumn. The first Tramburg video got into the where, who, and when of trams in Hamburg, but I wasn't completely solid on if I'd answered the questions, what's left of it, why should we bring them back now, and how do we proceed? I know I'm usually a bit funny and whatever the hell in these, but I've had a lot on my mind lately, especially of recent things in the States. Yikes. If that's what you're here for, though, here's Mario and Sonic kissing. You're laughing, right? I guess there's kind of a pensive tone in this video, I guess. I've been thinking about activism, learning from history, and what it truly means to do and up to those around me in dark times, along with what it means to truly be part of a community lately. And to get into that, let's talk about a recent trip I took to a grocery store. A few months back, I had to take my cat to the vet. Nothing serious, he just needed his shots updated. Despite living in Stade, the vet I go to is actually in Hamburg. And as Tiberius had been rather well behaved, I thought a trip to the pet store to get him a new toy and maybe some treats was in order. The Das Futterhaus pet shop I went to was inside of a Riva shopping center. Basically a big grocery store, some smaller shops connected inside of it. This Riva Center, the Riva Center Stanislavski and Los, is itself a rather important part of Hamburg tram network history. Originally, this served as a tram depot at the line terminus at Dorotheenstrasse. And in 2014, a relic of that era returned to this former Dorotheenstrasse depot. Fittingly, a number 15 tram set in Richtung Dorotheenstrasse. Of course, the track it's on is temporary and not electrified, but it is open to the public 2 days a week. Unfortunately, not on either of the days I went there, so I was just stuck milling about the outside of it. This tram is actually maintained by a couple of older individuals who, on the open days, are even present to answer questions. It really does seem to be meticulously maintained and has some beautiful historical tidbits set up around it. But perhaps most poignant here is where it's located, in the middle of a parking garage. Trams are phased out in Hamburg because, in part, of the perceived dominance of the car and automotive technology. And what is this tram here if not being dominated by the prevalence of cars? Buses in the Hamburger und S-Bahn networks, being seen as a valid replacement to fill in gaps was also part of getting rid of the trams as well. And I will admit that Hamburg on the whole has a fantastic, if flawed, transit system. It really is an interconnected set of networks. First of its kind actually, the HVV, HVV, is an agency consisting of all these operators and was the first in Germany to allow integrated ticketing. This means that, say, you could get a ticket on the U-Bahn, but if the S-Bahn covered the same zones and was faster, you could just take that instead. On the whole, I really do like the rapid transit railways of Hamburg. A criticism I've gotten on my Tramburg discussions and proposals is that tram construction in Hamburg would just come at the expense of other transit modes. Indeed, it could even take away resources and focus from other current projects, such as the U5 and the S4. And honestly, it's a common criticism of the transit world, especially here in Germany. Similar arguments, but more so pertaining to buses, were actually recently used by the conservative CDU party in Kiel to try to stop funding for their upcoming S-Bahn tram network. But my main rebuke here is how different transit modes serve different purposes. The Hamburg U-Bahn is a heavy rail metro, high capacity, high frequency, truly a great way of moving district to district around the city. While not the case in most cities, within Hamburg, the S-Bahn also often acts as a supplement to the system, really operating metro-esque in the core of the city north of the Elbe, except, being even more high capacity. The exception is in areas that go out of the city-state of Hamburg, particularly on the S5 line to Stade, where it pretty much becomes a glorified regional line after leaving the station at Neugraben. As I've learned since making this channel last year, a lot of that comes down to how lines are funded and whether that money is coming from Hamburg or from the actual surrounding states where these lines are then operating once they leave Hamburg. In my case, looking at you, state government of Lower Saxony. I even want to give some praise to the Hamburg bus network. It's versatile and flexible, even if not always the most reliable. Special shout out to the minibuses that operate in the Blankenese district, weaving around tight, hilly turns with ease. There's no question that those are the best mode for that area. In other areas though, buses clearly aren't the best mode, and they've been pushed capacity-wise as far as they could possibly go. At that point, it really seems like you're one step away from just building a tram. Trams have a few major perks over buses on very straight, very heavily used lines, such as the 4 and 5 BRT-esque lines in Hamburg, which use those big 3-segment things I just showed you. First off, trams are typically higher capacity. Second up, rails allow higher acceleration due to the laws of friction. And third, as this particular route already has dedicated rights-of-way, the trams would not be impeded by car traffic because they would not be working mixed traffic. While trams can do that, and that's good if space is limited, they don't have to. Yes, also there is an S connection just nearby this corridor, but tram stops are often on the street and much closer together. And transit, we often talk about the last mile problem. A high-speed train could get you from Berlin to Hamburg in under 2 hours, but then you've got to get wherever you got to go in Hamburg. Oh good, if you want to go from Hauptbahnhof to Domtor here, the S-Bahn U-Bahn regional trains can get you to Domtor station. But then if you want to go down the street, it's a bit of a walk. We're talking about options here. And this is the option that, of course, would come at the expense of taking away more space from cars, thus making our city air cleaner, the sound of the street quieter, and giving more space for people to just exist. And yes, I know electric cars would also make the air cleaner, but those will just cause traffic problems too. I've heard Hamburg receive a lot of criticism in online urbanism spaces, particularly from those based in the Netherlands. In Hamburg, we absolutely give too much space to cars, and while cycling is very popular here, a lot of times it is seeming like it's popular in spite of the infrastructure, not always necessarily aided by it. But Hamburg is not just some car-centric hellhole. No. Let's return to Domtor station. Now this is what you see on one side of it. Look, no questions there from me. But this is on the other side of Domtor station. This park here is Planten und Blumen, a Low German name, and it's often ranked as one of the nicest parks in all of Germany. Heavy praise, I know, but it is a really lovely place. Beautiful flowers, lots of wildlife, zones of quiet among the hustle and bustle of the city, cafes, a bookstore, and also a prison. No, seriously, there's a prison here on one end. And sometimes you can listen to people yelling at their incarcerated loved ones in the evening. It's a little sad, actually. Hamburg has a lot of green space, actually, and seems more and more is being done to make it a greener and greener city over time. I mentioned these areas and some of these projects because I do think there's a desire and an ability to build projects like a tram line in Hamburg. We could even just go down from a tram network and build a singular tram line. There's a proposal I saw to extend the U4 line to Wilhelmsburg and then have a tram connection further south to Hamburg. I think as someone who lives south of the Elbe River, that would be great, and it would take a lot of pressure off the often packed S3 and S-Bahn lines. To start, just give me one line. Just one line, y'all. Come on, just one line. And you know, the trams would make sense here. Buses and S-Bahns are overcrowded, and as mentioned in previous videos of mine, Hamburg has a severe bottleneck at the central station. What would begin as one singular line in the Hamburg district could perhaps then extend north and help alleviate that bottleneck. But then the question becomes, I'm watching a YouTube video on this issue and I'm thinking about this now, but what's next? And that's the question, isn't it? What do we do next? What can we, as people who may, or I don't know where you are, may not even live in and around Hamburg, do if we truly want trams back in this city or wherever you may be? I talk about German politics a good bit here, and I want to mention a few different groups and points in history. First off, if you are in Hamburg, I have some good news for you. Last October, the Hochbahn, the organization that operates many of the buses and the U-Bahn lines, announced that they will be conducting a study to see the feasibility of building a new tram line in Hamburg. And I'd say if you're all for this, shoot them a message and let them know. Second comes something more from the political activism side. While the Hamburg S-Bahn plan from the early 2000s ultimately fell through, this was originally jointly put forth by the Hamburg Greens and the Hamburg Social Democrats. However, the modern main push for a tramway in the Lohr district has actually come from the Hamburg branch of the party Die Linke, literally the left. Their main proposal in Lohr is actually a counter to the proposed S-Bahn expansion that's planned there. Basically, the city wants an S-Bahn line S6 built, which would have a branch that goes into the Lohr district. It's a very traditionally transit underserved area, and I would love to see this there. The issue there comes with construction timelines. Construction of the S6 in Lohr wouldn't even begin at earliest by current projections until around 2040. While building a tram line would take time, sure, the most basic of basic tram services could likely be built in Lohr in a few years' time, and even connect with the nearby Elbgaststrasse S-Bahn station. Or, you know, so it's been said anyways. The left party in Hamburg has actually been really active in pushing for this project. They've even given talks about it before around the city. And I think a broad coalition of support could be built here for this project. And isn't that important for any political decision? Granted, I mean, full disclosure here as we're going into opinion stuff, I'll be the first to admit I'm also rather on the left politically. I'm a Jewish woman living in Germany. Obviously, I'm going to be against right-wing groups such as the AfD. But you know, even if you aren't as lefty as I am, this proposal is still worth looking at because I think connecting underserved regions like this, I think it would really benefit everyone, both those who live there and those who might be just passing through. Not just those with mobility issues, not just those who are lower income, not just those who hate driving. By taking room away from cars and building a tram line, these areas will become safer, quieter, more accessible, and just more comfortable for everyone. Besides, if you like driving, less cars on the road, even with less space for cars, will mean less traffic for you because more people will be opting to take the transit because they don't feel forced to drive. Just for the love of fuck, if you love driving, I'd rather you drive something like a Microlino or a Citroen Ami over an American SUV or pickup truck. Studies have even shown that a more transit-accessible community will be a livelier community. It starts by building a tram, and then what next? Festivals, parking areas, repurposes areas where life can just take place. Even in Hamburg, by the way, these very accessible, lively areas exist, such as back over in the area near Bahnhof Altona. Speaking of places that do in fact exist in Hamburg, I always like to answer viewer questions at the end of these videos, and today I'm going to answer a couple of them. First off, I recently did a short on the Riva tram, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video, and I incorrectly called that the last tram in Hamburg. There is actually a Baumarkt, which for those who are in North America, think of it like a German Home Depot. Anyways, it's in the Lokstedt district, and that also has a Hamburg tram inside of it. Though as far as I know, they never opened that one up for you to peer inside and sit in the driver's seat like they do at the Riva. And second up, I've been asked if I'm familiar with the Hamburg trams at the Rail Museum on Schönberger Strand near Kiel. And yes I am. I know that's not in Hamburg, but it's a museum that's nearby, and I'm actually really wanting to make a video on it. You know, there's actually a note I want to make about activism and advocacy here. What does it truly mean to be an advocate or to advocate for something? Really, I think often it can be as simple as just educating yourself and sharing info, or, you know, if you want to go further, joining local groups, or even just writing your local agencies with suggestions and ideas. Something to think about the time I wrote the local bus operator here in Stade, the KBG, about a 2-hour evening gap in bus service in one route, and then at the next schedule change, it was fixed. I mean, with hourly service, but it's better than what we had before. Even just talk with your friends and neighbors about these things if you're passionate about them. Have you ever thought about all of the people you're in community with? The people you see every day? The people you interact with? The bus drivers, the mail people, the people you see at the grocery store? Do they have the same complaints about the transit as you? This doesn't even just go for transit. What's bothering you in your community? What's bothering them? Why or why not? What's stopping them from saying something? What would make your community better? What's stopping you from saying something? And if you don't feel comfortable doing so, why? How we get around and bringing it back to transit really affects us all, and can maybe even be used as a way to start organizing for a better world in general. On one last note, I want to leave you all with a fun fact. Nearby city of Cuxhaven used to be part of Hamburg. In 1914, they built their own tram line, which thanks in part to World War I, was only in service for 4 weeks. Isn't history neat?